Do I need? No, it's not. Okay. Hello. Okay. Um, it is now 6:30 p.m. I would like to call the Special Public Art Commission meeting of September 14th, 2023 to order. Before I proceed, I would like to take a moment to go over our meeting protocols for today. The South Pasadena Special Public Art Commission meeting scheduled on September 14th, 2023 will be conducted both in person and virtually via Zoom to maximize public safety while still maintaining transparency and public access. Members of the public can observe the meeting via Zoom. Staff, will you take roll call?
Commissioner Wong, excused absence. Commissioner Burke, excused absence. Commissioner Piazza.
Here.
Vice Chair Andes
Here.
and Chair Kuramitsu.
Here.
We have quorum.
Commissioners and staff will move on to the approval of agenda. Commissioners and staff, do you have any request for additions or revisions to the agenda? If so, please raise your hand. Okay. Yeah, okay. Seeing no request, I would like a vote of the commission to proceed with approval of the agenda as submitted. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Okay, so our agenda is approved. And now to public comments. The public comments and suggestions. The Public Art Commission welcomes public input. Members of the public were asked to provide comments to the public art comments to the email address publicartcomments@southpasadenaca.gov by 12 p.m. today. Pursuant to state law, this commission may not discuss or take action on issues not on the meeting agenda, except that members of the commission or staff may briefly respond to statements made or questions. Staff may be asked to follow up on such items. Staff, did we receive any general public comments or suggestions?
We did not receive any general public comments or suggestions in chambers or via Zoom.
Thank you very much. So we will move on to presentation. We'll now be hearing from our presenter, City Attorney Roxanne Diaz, who will be speaking on the overview copyright and legal issues related to programs on public art.
Thank you, Chair and members of the Commission. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. My name is Roxanne Diaz, and I'm the City Attorney. I've been here for just about 3 months. To say that I've hit the ground running and I'm still running is an understatement, to say the least, but I'm very glad to be here. This topic is something that personally I am a strong believer in the value of public art to both community, to children. I think that, more cities and really should just, art is just an economic driver in addition to all the beauty that it brings to every city. My oldest son, started painting at the age of 3, is going to be graduating from the Penny Stamps School of Art and Design in Michigan this year. And it's just been great to see that through his own life. But also my husband and I, we try to collect, new artists when we can and love to go to art walks. And so this is something that I truly am passionate about. And I've been lucky in my career to be able to work with our cities. We represent over 35 cities throughout California and work with them on issues with respect to art. My first, foray into the world of art was working on an exhibition, a Sam Malouf exhibition, who is a wood maker in his beautiful rocking chairs, and did that for the city of Beverly Hills. And then I proceeded to work. My very first big assignment was with Yayoi Kusama before she became a name. And that was just so interesting and fascinating. Had the chance to work with Robert Graham as well. and a variety of other artists. Philip K. Smith out in the desert worked with a client to get some art from the Coachella Valley Music and Art Festival. So this is something that I have been dabbling in for many years in addition to my legal work. So putting it aside. But yes, I think this is a topic that comes up with a lot of cities with respect to how do you balance the issues of copyright, ownership, and the issue of moral rights. And I guess for the benefit of the public and those on television, if you indulge me, I'll just go over a little bit of the highlights of the report, even though I know all of you have already reviewed it. And I think, as we all know, and including in your own art program, it starts with a call for artists or request for proposals. And with that always comes agreements. The lawyers are always the downer in the group. But that said, I think there's value to agreements, even on the subject of art, that both protect or at least, make it clear what the circumstances are between the artist and the city. The most common issues, of course, as I mentioned, have to do with ownership, copyright, removal, and then not so much destruction, but that's what people tend to talk about just because the way the law is set up. For the benefit of those that may watch this later, I just wanted to go over briefly the legal framework that really underscore the common issues between artists and cities. First of all is the ownership of artwork, and that is the Copyright Act of 1976. And that protects, amongst other things, works of authorships that include pictorial, graphic, and sculptural artwork. And it would include paintings and illustrations, and drawings, and much more. And under the Copyright Act, the law provides artists exclusive rights to do 4 things. They can reproduce their work, they can distribute their work, which means they can sell it, distribute it. They can create derivative works, essentially prepare new works based off the original work. You see that in merchandising. And they could also display the copyrighted work. And the duration of one's copyright in the work across all genres has not changed. It's generally the life of the artist plus 70 years. The second big issue, or the second legal, I guess, framework when looking at artist agreements with cities has to do with what's called moral rights. And those are rights that go back, I believe, to France in terms of rights that are personal to the artist. And those rights are rights of attribution and integrity of a visual art of a recognized stature. And in 1990, the Visual Artists' Rights Act was enacted as an amendment to the Copyright Act. And as I mentioned, it protects the artist's moral rights. But what does that mean? So it states that an artist has a right to prevent the intentional distortion, mutilation, or other modification of their work, which would be prejudicial to his or her honor or reputation. And in the case of works of a recognized stature, the artist may prevent its destruction. And VARA also provides the artist with the right to claim ownership of the work and also to prevent the use of his name or her name of any work which he or she did not create. And you typically see that if a piece has been modified and of course not to the scale or to the liking of the artist, and they will disclaim the work, and they have a right to do that. The counterpart in California is called the California Art Preservation Act. It's not completely the same, but for the most part, it also provides that no person can intentionally commit or allow any physical defacement, mutilation, alteration, or destruction of fine art. Generally, we always refer to the Visual Artists' Rights Act because the two are in the areas that are similar because of the concept of federal preemption. If 2 laws are the same, the federal law will preempt the state law in the areas that it is similar. And so many of us will just refer to the Visual Artists' Rights Act, the federal law. But in agreements, you will see as standard that if those rights are waived, it's both VARA and CAPA. And so when an artist, when an artist sells their work, they sell the physical, tangible piece of the work. They don't sell the copyright. And so in an event of a sale, the title of the artwork will pass to the buyer, but the copyright and the artist's moral rights to that work remain with them. That said, the law does provide that the artist can transfer the copyright of their artwork to the purchaser. And with respect to the moral rights, they cannot transfer it, but they can waive it. And so when a city purchases art for their collection, agreements are made, and the issue and the question always comes whether the city should retain the copyright, whether it should license some uses, whether the artist should waive their moral rights. And in some communities that have robust, thriving art programs, it becomes kind of a tug pull with, I think, both those on the commission, those on the council, to try to balance that. And I think from my perspective, in the way that I've dealt with this issue for a variety of clients, is that there shouldn't be a bright line rule. I don't take the notion that, for example, that we should have the artist waive their copyright in every instance. I think it depends on the type of art. I think it depends on the purpose of the art and what the goals are for that particular city with that purchase. And I think if I can give you some examples of how I've seen this play out, I think that's probably a better way to do it. When we were negotiating with Robert Graham, it was for a particular program. And so if you ever go to Rodeo Drive on the corner of, or at the median of Rodeo Drive and Dayton Way, there is probably like a 6 or 7 foot sculpture called Torso, and it's named Gabrielle. And Robert Graham was working with a nonprofit entity called the Rodeo Drive Association, and along with the city, put together a program called the Walk of Style. And this was back in the early 2000s. I'm dating myself, but probably I think 2006 or 5, somewhere along that line. But the purpose was to create something similar to the Hollywood Walk of Fame, but to recognize fashion, the world of fashion and designers, and to provide awards and to provide plaques, just like the Walk of Fame, on Rodeo Drive. And so as part of this program, again, an economic development perspective, it fit in line with what Rodeo Drive is all about in terms of style and fashion. And so it was both looked at from economic point of view, but also from the art point of view. And so we entered into an agreement with Robert Graham, the Rodeo Drive Association, and the city, where the nonprofit association purchased the art, was transferred to the city, and we received from Robert Graham all of the intellectual property, all the copyright, waiver of moral rights. There was some limited language in terms of whether, when we made derivatives, if he needed notice, but it was very limited, actually. And the goal there was to allow the city really the maximum flexibility in this program, so that we had the torso, it was very visible, but then we also purchased 10 maquettes of the torso, and we celebrated different fashion houses throughout the years. The one that I was just lucky enough to go to, which is the House of Versace, where Donatella Versace came to the city, and essentially in front of City Hall, we did a full tent, brought her florist in from Italy, and the whole thing, and they honored Gianni Versace post his death, and they provided him with a maquette and also with a plaque on Rodeo Drive with a quote of his and with a quote of hers. And so being able to own all the intellectual property allowed us to enter into agreements with Rodeo Drive Association to license back to them the use of the torso in their collateral work, in their, in their promotion, also with the plaques as well. And it allowed the city and the Rodeo Drive Association a lot of freedom. with respect to what to do with it. And that program probably lived through maybe 10 years. It had, I guess, it hasn't been done in a long time. It was very expensive. But for whatever reason, I guess at one point in time, it didn't feel to the association or the city that we needed to move forward. But if you ever do walk on Rodeo Drive, you'll see the plaques there. You'll see the torso. It was a really great program at the time. And so again, I think it depends on what the goals of the city were. And it really was to have ultimate flexibility to do this economic driver of a program, but to be able to do that, we needed the freedom to do what we wanted to do. And I think when artists and when I'm talking to artists, they feel like, they're afraid that their art's going to be destroyed or, mutilated or changed. And from a city's perspective, no city that I've ever worked with has ever done that. And so I think, in terms of negotiations between an artist and maybe private parties or corporations versus cities, I think the end goal for the cities are always different. Another example is with the Yayoi Kusama piece. That particular piece, it was her first public art piece in the United States, I think ever actually. And it was called Hymn of Life Tulips. And it was this beautiful, these tulips coming out of the ground. I believe they were steel insert, but a plexiglass or some kind of fiberglass, I think, on the outside. And it was meant to be, outdoor public art. And it was a really big deal. I mean, her life, as all of you know, is just fascinating. And so, again, we purchased all of the intellectual property rights. We worked with a fabricator because that's the way she works. And then her team came and then they painted the art once it was fabricated, and then it was installed. In that particular agreement, sometimes other issues that arise are, in terms of warranty and maintenance. I'm not sure. I was trying to remember why I did this, but I worked in a 10-year warranty for the art piece with the fabricator. And sure enough, after a couple of years, that type of art work with that type of medium was deteriorating. And so the fabricator actually replaced it, certain pieces, I think 2 or 3 times over the years. And so it came to the point where the city decided that it was going to recreate it out of steel instead. But again, it provided the city flexibility. We worked with Yayoi Kusama and her team because it was such an important piece. And the value of that piece, I think we purchased it for $150,000 in the early 2000s. And the other part of it too, in terms of owning all the copyright, owning all the intellectual property, we loaned it to the New York Botanical Gardens for their exhibition on Yayoi Kusama. And so it traveled there. It was supposed to happen before COVID. COVID hit, and I think it occurred in the last couple of years. And so, there, if we had not had her waive her waive of moral rights in terms of, all the things that we needed to do to the piece to be able to keep its integrity, it just would have been such a back and forth that wouldn't allow the city to be nimble and responsive. Because I think any city that does public art to that scale is responsible. And so, I think that's an important part of it. Another instance, we had another client who had this, I forget what the artist was, but a big public art piece. Everybody called it the Spider, and it was in the middle of a big median with lots of grass. Well, lo and behold, a car crashed into it and pretty much destroyed it. And the cost for the city to fix it just was insane. Also, it was so large that the cost for us to store it was also very expensive. And so there it was the only instance where we wanted, we didn't have the means to do it. We didn't have, I don't remember if we had all the intellectual property rights because it came before I came on board. But we had to work with the artist who actually didn't want it back either because of the cost. So, I think, in those instances, that maximum flexibility worked, and it wasn't a bad negotiation at all. Although I will say that Robert Graham on the opening party for that exhibit said to me, because he had just finished the cathedral, he said, not even God asked me to waive all of those, or he said, not even God had me enter into an agreement. And so it was a funny moment, but not so much. But there are other times, where an artist wants to keep their intellectual property rights. And in that case, it depends on what the goal of the city is. If it's permanent art, if it's not going to be used for a commercial purpose, then we negotiate to get a perpetual license, to be able to do 2D, works, to be able to use it for the city's use in terms of promotion. So I think, it depends on what the piece is. Again, it depends on what the goals are. So I don't, I don't subscribe to the notion that it has to be locked in stone for every piece, because I think that maximum flexibility is really important. So I've talked enough, and I'm happy to answer questions or have more discussion. Or if I miss something that the commission would like me to look at, I'm happy to do that as well.
I just want to say thank you for such a interesting explanation. Clearly, you've thought about this. You've had a lot of experience with it, and I appreciate it very much. I know it's something that we've talked about on our commission, several times. And I love how you are seeing this as really, focusing on the context of the work, the situation. I think that's very smart, because you're right. The cities have a lot of responsibilities, a big deal to accession a work of art. It's a commitment for a long time. At the same time, we are an artist-friendly city, and I mean that's been a kind of a lot of the dialogue that we've had on our commission. What does that really mean? And as I've been thinking about this kind of concept of being flexible on these things, I think makes a lot of sense. And I think I was really happy to hear that you're thinking about this as well, and that there isn't some set in stone way of proceeding, but perhaps even that each contract might be considered and written specific to the needs of the city and of the work of art, and that we perhaps be open to kind of provisos or different writings of that contract, particularly around kind of the moral aspects of it. And is that something that you've had experience with? I mean, in terms of specifics, if you ask someone, let's say, to waive their VARA rights to kind of reinsert back
I have.
specific kind of, I don't.
There are specific provisions, like especially with notice in terms of if the city is going, and this is not so much on the big structural sculpture pieces, but more on, and this is murals would be probably the biggest example, but also even for young artists are these wraps that go around utility boxes.
Yeah.
I've worked a lot with different cities on wraps, and I know that in one of my clients, we had a huge debate over issues of copyright and a waiver of moral rights with the wraps. And the way that I looked at it, and that's where I was introduced to the paper from, is it Sarah Connolly? And so the way that I looked at it there is we needed the ability, because of the nature of that artwork, the way it's wrapped around the utility box, while we want it to be, we want it to be fresh looking for however long it's going to be there. At some point it deteriorates, that plastic, it just does. And then for some reason, that particular city had issues with people running into utility boxes. And so, from the copyright perspective, we did not retain the copyright. we retained a license, a perpetual license to be able to do images, to be able to include it in as part of our collateral, as part of our history, because that was important to that program. It was just a brand new program, but there wasn't a need for the copyright. There was no commercial aspect that the city was looking at. The long-term goal was really just to bring beautification into the city, almost on a temporary but rolling basis. But we did ask for the waiver of moral rights and explain that to the commission, who was very much against the agreement that I put together. I came before the commission to explain it, and once I explained it, they felt much more comfortable, because some of them were also young artists as well, and it was an affront to them that what we were asking in their own community, and they were a lower income community as well. And so from that aspect, I think we worked out a compromise. I explained why I felt it was important for us to be able to be nimble and quick, to be able to, and in that case, you would destroy the art, you would mutilate it, you would transform it, because it's a different kind of artwork. But there was no need for us to own the copyright for it. But we wanted to make sure that we had a license to be able to, publicize it, give the artists, their credit, and utilize it as part of, that program. So, they're
Right.
they're different. And when we purchase art that's not commissioned for the city as well, artists in those instances, the artists will tend not to want to provide or release their copyright. I didn't work on this agreement. I at one point in time, I worked as the chief assistant city attorney in Beverly Hills for about 10, 11 years, but then I went to other assignments. But there's a piece from Ringo Starr there on Santa Monica Boulevard, and it was a donation to the city. However, there in the agreement, I believe that he retained the copyright, and we retained a number of different types of license for a number of different types of uses, and also the right to remove it as well. It's in a prominent location. And so, and sometimes just art needs to get moved. So there's, and to answer your question, long-winded way of
Yes.
answering your
So
question.
yes, so
Yeah.
so notice, and that could be, I mean, to keep that in the forefront of our mind, as we are a arts friendly city,
Mhm.
that notice, or the right to be consulted if there's any
Correct.
repairs or major cleaning.
And the right to have them, if we are going to remove the art and think about selling it, the right to have the artist retrieve it.
Right.
As well. And so there are different ways to approach VARA if there are concerns from the artist's perspective, and those concerns are not, and the city has different goals or means for that particular piece of art.
I guess, this is all really, really helpful
Good.
to hear. And I think this idea of trying to, because we're at the moment, thinking about policy and trying to set policy, trying to build in this flexibility to the policy would be, I think, of utmost importance,
Yeah.
and I think would be the way to get it to be the most useful
Mhm.
for the community and to get art out there.
Yes.
So it would be really interesting to see how that, like, what that looks like in terms of.
Yeah, from a policy perspective, it's always, I think, difficult to put into words kind of the contractual terms of an agreement. Um, and, um, and maybe it's more that it is um, from the policy and from the commission's perspective, that it is strongly encouraged, or a goal, maybe more on the strongly encouraged piece, in terms of ensuring that, there's flexibility and it's not a rigid formula in terms of ownership and the waiver of moral rights.
Yeah, that's
And-
what I'm hearing you say, is that you aren't necessarily advocating for a boilerplate.
No, not at all.
contract,
Not at all. I mean,
And
there's,
that these
yeah.
contracts will be something that will be negotiated, and that, I'm hoping that we will also, of course, keep our identity as a city with, artist friendly, at the forefront of this, but at the same time, we are a city,
Yeah.
right? We have specific needs of a city.
And I think if you look at like programs, like we work with the city of Brea and they have had a long-standing, public arts program. And of course, Beverly Hills, I don't feel like the artists that they've worked with feel that they're unfriendly, from that perspective. And so, but I do, and even when I felt like I was in hot water with the commission over the wraps, I think it just, people just need to sit down and have a conversation and recognize that everyone has different purposes and goals but I do believe, like strongly encourage that flexibility because ultimately it just depends. I mean, who would have thought that commission, the foresight to buy a piece from Yayo Kusama, to actually engage, and I think they engaged her for a long time to have her first big public art piece. And what happened afterwards with the deterioration, with, different things, none of us would have thought that that would have ever happened. And it actually, having that flexibility worked, tremendously to the city's benefit.
Was that in that particular instance, was she and her team consulted and how
so
they were to move forward with that?
My understanding is that they were, and there's some public reports out there, gender reports. I had moved on, even though my firm still represents Beverly Hills, I'd gone to another assignment at that point in time. And so I was doing less artwork, now, work regarding art for them. But yes, I went back and looked at different reports and they were consulted and they were there line in line the entire time. And in fact, I found a report where there was an art conservationist who was engaged by the city and said, if the city continues to fix the art without, really doing the steel work instead, that you'll never be able to get that art piece be the same because it has to get painted. And with being outdoor art with the bright colors that it had, it fades. And so it's going to lose its integrity by fixing it every single time. And so, the city, I think, made the right choice to spend the money and to work with the artists and made it out of steel instead. And that, took care of that issue.
Well, no,
Great.
I really appreciate your expertise and insights in this, and you're welcome. It was a welcome presentation.
Well, good. I'm glad. And, I have my own son who probably one day wants to sell his art.
Yeah.
So I'll have to remember that as well.
Well, thank you so much.
Yes. And as you go through your policies, I know Allison won't be shy, but, I'm happy to help and assist and, help guide in whatever way I can.
Great.
Because I've done some deaccession policies,
Yeah.
different things over the years. And so I'm happy to do that. And I will say I was happy to, generally, very happy to come here, but also the fact that you have the art walks and you have different things here and you just value art actually was just, kind of cherry on top for me because I think just that's so important. And you really see it throughout the community. So thank you so
Great.
much for
Thank
your
you.
time.
Thank you. Great. Yes. Yes. Thank you very much. Okay, we will move on to our next item on creative crosswalks and bulb outs.
I just want to thank staff. Thanks to the commission for having me here. I'm really excited to talk about this and hopefully I'll get you guys excited about this as well. First, a little bit about myself. My name is Mike Siegel. I'm with South Pass Active. We're a local group of residents. Most of us are parents who are advocating for active transit in the city. And we do that through events. And yes, it is on. And one of the things you may have heard us from is our weekly bike bus, where we do a safety in numbers bike ride to the elementary schools, Marengo and AV. every Tuesday morning. So if you have 10 minutes to spare and want to join us on a Tuesday morning, it's pretty awesome to see the kids' faces when we all ride to school together. So I'm here to talk about creative crosswalks and bulb outs. And as I go through this presentation, going to talk about the benefits, talk about where our city code is today and where it could be, and some potential places in the city where we might do something. And this photo will come back later, but just keep in mind that this kind of looks like an intersection in our city currently. All right. Does this advance it? This one? Okay, thank you. So what are creative crosswalks and bulb outs? Well, you know what a crosswalk is. A bulb out, if you're not familiar, these are where the entrance to the crosswalk is from the sidewalk. They're the little bulb outs there that provide safety for people crossing the street as it lessens the amount of distance that they have to cross. And with these creative crosswalks, all we're doing is adding color, adding paint to them to bring attention. And there are a variety of reasons why we do this, but they're typically at markers, points of interest in the city, whether schools, parks, places of business, but they don't necessarily have to be. And there's some examples I'll have later as well. So there are many, many benefits to this, and I'm only going to concentrate on three: the placemaking, the economic impact, which Ms. Diaz had just previously mentioned, and the safety improvements, which are most dear to my heart. All right, so placemaking. I don't think I need to tell you guys about public art and its importance in placemaking. With creative crosswalks and bulb outs as one element of your public art policy, you're really helping to create a place where people gather, a place that eventually will start creating a social cohesion, community, a place that people are proud of, and that it'll attract the people in the city, but also from outside. What you see here in the background is Lancaster, California, just over the hill. If you are not familiar with it, they have a thriving art scene, and their main street is pretty amazing. They've completely redesigned their main street over the past 10 to 15 years. And as you see, there's a creative crosswalk there that I believe is just outside their museum. And it is just a fun place to be. There's always people around. And people both from the community and outside the community has been a draw across LA County. Economic benefit. So there are no stats related to creative crosswalks and creative bulb outs specifically by themselves to economic benefit. So what we did is we pulled together creative districts that had them as elements in their overall plan. And all of them did very well. And as you'd expect, when you create something visually pleasing and you recreate that place, right? You start to get a lot of foot traffic, and from there, everything just starts to cascade. The city can use it in their marketing, draw people in, you get tourism, and we see increased revenue for both the businesses and tax revenue for the city. And, you know, importantly, it also provides employment opportunity. As these businesses grow, they need more people. That provides employment opportunity for your youth in the city, both recently graduated and high school students. And it provides employment opportunities for the artists to actually be a part of these creative endeavors. And one I wanted to focus on is Virginia Beach. The Virginia Beach Creative District was started in 2015. The study is from 2022. So they looked at around 6 years of data. And again, it's not solely creative crosswalks and bulb outs, but you can see there that it's a major element of what they did. And it brought 50 new or expanded businesses to the area. It really drove people to their social media and tourism. And, you know, again, from that flowed commercial development, revenue for the businesses, tax revenue for the city, and in that district and also the surrounding areas, it increased the property values. So we know that this art and especially creative crosswalks as part of your policy help the economic development of your city. All right, now on to safety and well-being, and I break this up in two sections. Want to start off with, mental well-being, and as we talked about earlier with placemaking, when you start to create those social connections and the community spirit, we know that it's been proven that it combats feelings of anxiety and social isolation, and that from that flows your mental health, but also your physical health, because you're now in an area that's active. You're walking, you're biking, you're just in an active location. And if any of you follow Jane Jacobs, and the eyes on the street, when it comes to public safety, once you create that place, that community, we all look out for each other, and it becomes a very effective crime deterrent. But the most important to me personally is traffic violence and safety that comes from that. We are in an epidemic. It is bad out there. This on the left, you'll see a graph from LA City. On the right are stats from LA County. And these, although are pretty bad in LA, reflect California as a whole and the United States as a whole. And 2022 was just a deadly year for people on bikes and walking. And it's especially kind of crazy when you think about that. Los Angeles is car centric. We need a car to get around, and a majority of road users are going to be drivers. And yet 40% of all traffic fatalities last year were people biking and walking. So it's scary out there. But that's where creative crosswalks and bulb outs, we actually do have data on this when it comes to safety. When they're installed, 50% drop in crashes involving pedestrians and cyclists, 27% increase in the rate of drivers yielding, the 56% decrease in episodes of cars braking too quickly to avoid pedestrians and other close calls. I'm sure if you guys have walked around just our city and you try to cross a crosswalk, you may have had a close call yourself. The great thing about these is that, we have distracted drivers out there. These are visual pieces that draw the attention of the drivers. They know that they're entering a place that they have to pay attention. They know that they're driving into a place that has people. And so we see the data. The data proves that creative crosswalks, bulb outs help safety. All right, I wish the city attorney had stayed just for a little bit longer to make sure that I was correct in my reading of this. There is no current code today for creative crosswalks and bulb outs, and the code is pretty thin on the where that lies, but it's the maintenance of crosswalks lie with the city at the discretion of the city manager. And obviously the city manager is going to talk with, the Public Works Department council before making any decisions, but ultimately there's a lot of leeway here and a lot of opportunity based on where our code is today to get ad hoc projects in. And so we have two routes, right? A short-term route and a long-term route. Short-term route, as I said, partnering with Public Works and the city manager on ad hoc projects, talking with Ted Gerber, the director of the Public Works Department. He's actually pretty excited about this and would love to see something like this come to be. On the right-hand side, you see what the city of Salinas did for their code when it comes to creative crosswalks. They made it super simple. If you follow these, once you apply and you follow these 4 guidelines, you automatically go to design review. And whether we're talking about a short term or the goal of ad hoc projects or a long term goal, I think you want to follow the guidelines listed there. One, this would not be city run. We were just talking about city ownership of art, but the city's budget is tight, the staff resources are tight, and what other cities that have done this well are typically looking to 501c3s like Spark to be the ones to manage and maintain the creative crosswalk. It doesn't mean the city's not involved. There has to be a traffic study plan and an implementation plan just so that everyone's safe as these things are being installed. But it really would fall onto a private entity to manage the process, find the artists, help with the installation, and maintain afterwards. Creative crosswalks must be in an existing crosswalk. We are not going to be creating crosswalks. That's what Public Works and the Mobility Commission's for. But Creative bulb outs, although typically at a crosswalk don't have to be. And there's some opportunities in South Pasadena where we could see that, especially on some of these slow street installations that have just gone in. You can have them at signalized or non-signalized intersections. So, thinking about a non-signalized intersection, such as right here in front of City Hall on Mound, a lot of foot traffic, non-signalized, a lot of cars speeding, perfect spot for something like that. For the creative crosswalks, you typically see them on streets that are 35 miles per hour or less. So you wouldn't have it on Huntington, for example. But creative bulb outs, although most likely you would want to maintain that, don't have to be. You might, depending on where it's at, want to put something like that on Huntington. And as I'll talk about later on one of the projects that Public Works will be working on, Huntington is one of them. And Mr. Gerber has stated that he would be pretty excited about adding that as an element. There are state and California guidelines that have to be followed that are listed at the bottom. But one thing that should definitely be noted as well is that you would want the artistic elements to contrast the pavement for many reasons, but most notably because those with vision impairment, they need that contrast in order to be able to tell that they're in a crosswalk. Next, please. Oh, and by the way, I'm talking very fast and saying a lot of stuff. You can stop me at any time if any questions you have. But now to the fun part, actual examples. So here's Honolulu, Jersey City, Baltimore. As we talked about earlier, the left is at a school, the middle is at the park, and you can't see it, but the right, there's a bunch of businesses there and a school and park not far away. And another thing you'll notice is that the infrastructure installation is pretty basic. All of them, all they have is just a couple of inexpensive flex posts to define the area. But what really makes it pop, what really fills it out is the artistic element. And you can see on the Baltimore picture some kids crossing the street. It shortens the distance. It makes it feel a lot safer. It is a lot safer, but also makes it feel a lot safer, right? So if you just have the flex post without the paint, that distance feels further, feels less safe, and that when something feels less safe, there are less people that are willing to use it. Artistic bulb outs like this create that feeling of safety as well as actual safety. And so you would have more people out and about and actually using them. Here are some crosswalk examples, Austin, Spartanburg, and West Hollywood. The West Hollywood one, I just talked about contrasting paint with the sidewalk or with the crosswalk. I wouldn't recommend that one, but I wanted to put up there as an option, as something that has happened. But over the two examples on the left, you can clearly see their crosswalks. You can clearly see the artistic element for both drivers and pedestrians. You know that this is a crosswalk and it is drawing your attention to it, that it's also a place for people. All right, where can we do this in South Pasadena? So let's talk about slow streets. If you're not familiar with the slow streets, it is a current temporary installation on 3 streets. The 2 largest are on Oak and Glen. On Oak and Grand. And they're very simple, used with a very small grant of inexpensive materials. And their whole purpose is just to show residents that we can slow down traffic on their streets. They're not meant to be permanent. They're not meant to be pretty. They're just meant to show that we can actually, slow down traffic. If a project like this, a pilot like this is successful and the city wants to move forward, making it more permanent, usually that involves making the materials also more permanent. They're going to be cement, they're going to be curb, planters, trees, or an artistic element like this. So this is at Oak and Fremont. Currently, I don't have a photo of the installation from above, unfortunately, but you see the before without anything, and then a potential. I am not an artist, so hopefully we could do a lot better than this. But it shows that, both a bulb out and a crosswalk in an artistic manner, that you can create that space, create that safety, create the ability for both drivers and pedestrians to know what is there and know that this is an area for people as well. And for a lot of these other slow street installations, if they were to become permanent, things like a creative crosswalk or bulb out would be a great supplement to the other permanent infrastructure changes that would happen. Other opportunities. So the city has also received some grant money on Fair Oaks. There's a lot of things that they're doing there. And one of the things they're looking at are the bulb outs. I know the bulb outs are a bit controversial. A lot of people don't like them. From a safety perspective for pedestrians, they help, but they are not. They were not well installed, and what they could really use is to be visually seen. And again, this is where it would be a great opportunity for something like a creative bulb out within that project. I talked about Huntington and Fremont. Public Works just sent out a notice. There's going to be community meetings next week and the week after about, you know, some of the potential designs and community input. Again, talking with Mr. Gerber, he would love, this is about 2 to 3 years down the road when they might actually break ground, but he would love an element like an artistic crosswalk or bulb out to be part of whatever happens on those two streets. And then finally, mission. We can go to the last slide here. Back to this photo. This very similar to where our train is. This is at the Lincoln Hub in Chicago. It's a 4-block stretch, much like our 4-block stretch here in Mission. And if you look, they did something very simple here. They didn't do a lot. Just a couple of flex posts, as you can see, and those are pretty inexpensive materials, a few planters, some places to sit, and then just a lot of paint. And you can see it really decreases the distance between the streets, makes it inviting and friendly. There are businesses on all those corners, and it's now an inviting place to actually be. And they've reclaimed 5,000 square feet by doing this. They did it fairly inexpensively. And it has encouraged pedestrian activity there and really helped those local businesses in that area. And we have a pilot coming up in November on Mission Boulevard where in addition to slowing down the traffic, there's going to be street furniture, there's going to be planters, there's going to be other elements coming in, and something like this would be a fantastic addition to it, either that pilot or if it's something that becomes permanent, something to think for down the road when it does. And with that, I hope I've convinced you guys that creative crosswalks and bulb outs are perfect for our city. And if you have any questions, please let me know.
Great. Thank you so much. That was really terrific. Does anyone have any?
Yeah, I mean, I loved your presentation. Thanks for coming. You've got a lot of great ideas. I think this is just the type of thing that our city needs. Some creative juice out there. That's what we're hoping for here on the Arts Commission. I'm just a little bit confused though on, is this connected to what's happening at the slow street movement of our city right now?
It is not. This is not something the city is planning. So this would be something that would be supplemental to it. And as that's why I spoke about it not being something that the city initiates, but something that, you know, an artistic organization like a 501c3 would help the city with. And I'm actually not familiar with the K-rails and I know we had art on the K-rails.
That was Spark.
That was Spark as well, right?
Yeah,
So I would imagine it'd be something similar to
okay, because that was
that process.
my other kind of question, like your budget or how you're envisioning this. So you're thinking more of like a partnership between a nonprofit,
right,
and the city.
Yeah, and in a lot of the cities we looked at, the cities that were most successful are the ones that did that partnership. They're not the ones that led the process or owned it, but they worked with organizations that did.
Right. Got you. That was, and then you're thinking, my other question that I had was bubble out and crosswalk or one in the same, you know.
Maybe not necessarily.
You're just open to different.
It's really, you know, up to whichever organization takes it on and feels like, hey, you know, I think this spot would be great. I have my own ideas, but you know, at the end of the day, I think the organization that's deciding to take it on would have that discretion and then would, you know, work with Public Works to make sure that it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think it sounds like an awesome idea.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it was, I think this would be, really terrific. So, Thank you.
Well, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's it. Great. Any other questions or comments or anything?
All right. Thank you guys so much for your time.
Thank
I really
you.
appreciate it. And if any questions come up,
Thanks for me.
Ms. Becker knows where to reach me.
Very much.
Thank you guys.
Um, okay, let's see. Oh, wait. I think we are now at the comments from the city council liaison. Which
Not
is
here.
absent. We will move on since the liaison is not present. We'll move on to the comments from the ad hoc committee on the public art policy handbook.
That
Which
would
is-
be
which is
me.
us.
So yes, so I hope you've had an opportunity to look at our memo that we've written. So Chris and I are working hard to try and develop the public arts policy, and just wanted to, because we just wanted to start establishing, what we're thinking of, so we can talk about it as a commission. We have made some observations, as you've seen here. We've looked through many different models, and one of the great things about this is it's not like we have to invent the wheel here, that there's a lot of great examples of these public art policies in many cities all around us in California. As a non-attorney, I personally found the City of Laguna Beach policy very accessible because it was very clearly written, and pretty comprehensive. So that has been, I thought, something that we kind of were like, yes, we can read this, understand it, and it makes a lot of sense. So we just wanted to put that out there, that that's something that we find has been a helpful model. Also, another recommendation was establishing kind of an artist registry for the city of South Pasadena, that we've just found while we've been here, that these new developers coming could really benefit from. I mean, I think that's kind of what I've had in mind, from having kind of an artist registry. That could be a starting point for those that needed to have, aren't, art savvy people, to just kind of get the ball rolling for them, and maybe as something that we as a commission could develop an ad hoc committee to kind of work on. That was something that we thought would be helpful and constructive in moving us forward, because I think that's what we want to do, is actually get this public arts policy kind of really, happen, right? So that's what this document is. And then also specific language recommendations we just zeroed in on a couple items of a policy that would be much broader. But we thought that the selection criteria for artists, and the way that a work of art is selected, and the criteria, was something that, I think is kind of the meat of these policies. So that's why we wanted to kind of get into it, just so we could get, some feedback, and, bounce this around, and talk about it a bit. And get any input that, we're small tonight, but it's on the record as something that we can put out there and get us going. Right. So I don't know if you've had a chance to look it over, if you've had any
Definitely
feedback.
Took a look at it.
Okay,
and,
great.
Found it really inclusive and straightforward.
Okay,
You
good.
know, it was like, I didn't have a lot of questions afterwards, because it was like, I felt like we have
Mhm.
a really solid foundation with this.
Right. That's what we're hoping
Great.
for. 'Cause
Yeah.
we're the same, like, let's be very clear. And I think this will be very helpful and try and have forethought about different kind of potential, you know, situations that might arise, that we could kind of cover these things and be kind of, you know, set of policies to you know,
Right.
to keep this, you know, to get us going. So good. I'm glad that you found it clear. That makes me feel good because that was really important. Because some of it, honestly, some of them we've looked at weren't as clear. That's why we've kind of zeroed in on clarity as as something that would be very helpful, I think, for all of us.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important and what you've done here is, you know, we're setting up the guidelines because we don't know every situation that's going to come up.
That's
And
right.
all we need is guidelines really because you're going to have to take everything individually.
Well,
That's the nature of art and artists. You can't
absolutely.
really have a strong, you know,
This is the
format.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So, and I think that was kind of also what we were hearing from the city attorney as well, in terms of the contract, which I thought was
Very, yes, that was very,
right.
I like the fact that she had so much flexibility in the way she was writing each contract
Right.
for each artist.
I did too. I thought that was great. So yeah, so this is, yeah, I don't know if you had any specific areas that you wanted, that you thought could be fleshed out, or I don't know, or
Vice Chair, as you continue talking, you're talking quieter and quieter, which is making it harder and harder, especially for the people who will transcribe the meeting into meeting minutes. So please help
Okay,
and speak into the microphone.
will do. Thank you for that.
I don't have much else to add other than, you know, this section that is included here is, of course, just one piece of a much bigger document.
Yeah.
And we are just to say that we are continuing to work on the rest of it, but we wanted to at least get the conversation going
Right.
and to get people sort of starting to kind of get into the headspace of putting together a full policy. And this was
Right,
a good place
right.
to start.
Yeah.
So, um,
and our plan is then to address
Mhm.
further elements of the policy. I don't want to state exactly what that will be because I don't want to put us in a box, but that's what we plan on doing
Mhm.
for every time we meet,
Yeah.
hopefully.
exactly.
So, and then, you know, it's part of the record and we can talk about it, and it's out there.
Okay. Well, I think that will conclude that section.
If I may just ask a
Yes.
clarifying question, Allison Becker, Deputy Director for the Community Development Department. Is there any particular instruction from the commission concerning the language of the memo? I mean, are we at a point where you'd like staff to add this language into our draft policy document? So that we're continuing to build our handbook, or would you prefer to revisit this with your other two colleagues, or how would you like staff to be supportive?
I mean, I think at this point,
I-
it would be very nice to add it to the draft of the handbook.
Very well.
And I think that will be, you know, moving the needle some, which I think is very important at this point.
Yeah,
So,
will do. Thank you.
yes, thank you. Thank you very much for that. Anything else? No, okay. Thank you very much. Okay, so we will go on to the next section. Comments from the Commissioner of Communications. Comments from staff. Any comments from staff?
No comments from me this evening. Just happy to be here with you guys.
Thank you.
Look forward to the next ad hoc meeting where you will advance something more.
We're trying, we're working.
All right. I think, is that it? I think that is it.
All right.
I think do I have to move to adjourn? I would like to move to adjourn the meeting. Oh, at, what time is it?
7:39.
7:39. Wow, 7:39 PM. Do we need to, that's it. It's done.
We're done.
We're adjourned.
Okay.
Thank